So we'll start off with call to order. And then a
Want
roll
to do a
call.
roll call?
Yep. So if I have everything. All right, so Chair Fan,
Here.
Vice Chair Rocha,
Here.
Randy Goodman,
Here.
Nicole Kennedy is absent, David Rowe is absent, Anthony Teeters,
Here.
Arnold Urias,
Here.
and I am assuming Council Liaison Cantelmi should be coming in any minute. So we do have a quorum, so we will get started. So if you want to.
Okay, let's dive in. First up are the minutes from the last meeting. I was absent. I've read them, but I don't know if they're accurate or not. How about you guys? Everybody okay?
Yeah, they're pretty good.
I actually read them, yeah, that's all there.
Good. Can I have a motion to approve?
Approved.
Okay, a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Unanimous? Okay, next up
So
is presentation.
Yep, next up we've got community workforce housing. So a week or two ago, everyone received an article from Mr. Urias about the new Regent Community Grant. So we have CAFMA Fire Chief Freitag here to kind of talk about that grant, how they're working with CAFMA and what it's going to have on the effect of workforce housing. And so I'll let Chief Freitag take it off. We'll have you come stand at the microphone.
Okay, sure.
Or you
Yeah,
can
whatever
take
you
it out
need.
there.
Yeah, go ahead. Just take this thing. Can you hear me with this?
Yeah, first a song.
Yeah, absolutely. Chair, members of the committee, thank you so much for the invitation to come here today. Just briefly, how we got to the point where the Board of Regents gave us a grant was the three major universities in the state are doing a recruitment and retention study for law enforcement and first responders. And I was one of the chiefs that they talked to, and I explained to them in my conversation that the biggest challenge we face in this area is the lack of attainable housing and trying to attract new employees, new recruits up into the area that don't live here because there's not a good solid pipeline of personnel in the system right now. And that the loss of a firefighter, if we train them and we lose them after a year, cost our agency, similar to the city of Prescott, about $100,000. And so that's pretty significant when we're talking about taxpayer dollars spent training and outfitting someone to lose it within 12 months. So they called me back about a month later and said, hey, we want to do another study. One to look specifically at attainable housing. And he said, but we're only looking at your area. And I said, well, that's great, but I need you to understand my area includes the city of Prescott. We may not cover it, but as far as the fire service goes, we're one. And so I need you to look at all of this and include the city of Prescott Fire Department as well. So the Board of Regents approved $58,000 and assigned us a research group to start looking at over the next 12 months. Actually, it's probably 10 months now. They've been doing it for a couple months. Attainable housing. And what I've been doing is feeding them information, one, from Yavapai College, because Yavapai College did a great job outlining what the problem is in the area, or the challenge for us. So I provided them that information, and then I've been talking to other people in different parts of the country asking, well, what are you doing in your area? Colorado, Breckenridge, or Vail. I mean, those are wonderful places to go and visit. They have fire departments. They have probably millions or hundreds of thousands of visitors a year. Where are their firefighters living? Well, in Colorado, they have a special program to help first responders. So I passed that along to the researchers, and they are reaching out to folks in Colorado to find out exactly what it is that the state has in place that allows them to help first responders get into more attainable housing solutions. Utah, look at Park City, Utah. Park City has a fire department, but they're kind of like us. They're far away from an area that's less expensive to live. So what is Utah doing to help their first responders? In Nevada, they have a program for responders to get into first-time housing with some assistance with loans. And then that's tied to, you have to live there 2 or 3 years before you could sell the property. But they help you get in. So they're looking at a multitude of different ideas, everything from development. So I've put them in contact, and they've met with Brad and Ron Fain to talk about what development possibilities exist. What are some attainable housing options that are smaller, maybe not the larger footprint of some of the homes in master plan communities. They're looking at townhome development, again, talking with Brad Fain and some others. Put them in touch with Jason Giese and whoever else is developing things to talk to them about what do they think might work for us. The hope is at the end of the study that we have some ideas on ways in which we can truly impact in a positive way attainable housing for not just first responders, but we apply this to law enforcement, to nursing, to teachers, folks coming in and just starting who really serve our community. What options are there? Is it something to help with entry into the housing market as far as mortgage? Well, that might take some sort of legislative changes at the state level in order to allow those things to happen. Is it something to do with how a property is built or zoned or classified? And is that a local thing, or is that an issue at the state level or the federal level? What do we need from that? So the hope is that the report gives us something that substantive, that if we do need to go to legislators, first and foremost, we can bring it to groups like yours, to the city of Prescott, to the town of Prescott Valley, Chino Valley, everyone out here, and say, here's some ideas and some solutions that NAU believes are sustainable, reasonable, and something that is attainable. Are you good with these ideas? Do you have a different spin on it? And then we can approach the state as a group and say, here's the legislative changes that need to be made in order for us to accomplish these things in the state of Arizona. And then developers, same thing. I know when I talked to Brad Fain, he said, hey, look, if you own the property, then you can control the cost of the units on the property. And I said, well, that's fantastic. As a fire district, we have one source of funding. I'm simply trying to survive right now and to be able to provide the personnel I need because we took a hit in our insurance service office rating. I'm trying to buy equipment that's gone up from $650,000 in 2020 to $1.1 million in 2023. I can't buy property. I just can't do it. So what are the other options? Some of the other things we looked at is we're going to go for, I'm just going to put this out there. Don't shoot me. But CAFMA's going to have to look at a bond in 3 to 5 years because it's the only way to build infrastructure. New fire stations, $10 million. We need something out of the training center. Well, one of the things I looked at the training center, and for those who know Steve Rutherford, I talked to him. I said, what if I put like a 10-unit dorm at the training center where I could transition people who are moving from the valley or trying to find a place up here where they've got a short-term place to stay? Because that investment may save the taxpayers money in the long term if I can retain employees, right? So those are some of the things that we're looking at on the attainable housing side. Another program I'm familiar with in Virginia, the state requires developers to set a certain percentage of product aside for lower income teachers, firefighters, police officers, nurses that are starting out. So you may sell 5 condos at $500,000 each, but one of them is going to be set at $250,000, right? And that is like an impact fee for developers to allow for access into more attainable housing, but attainable housing that is also livable, because that's the other part of it. And I know, for example, Prescott Valley has a significant apartment complex coming online soon. There's another one getting ready to come out of the ground that are supposed to be more affordable and in reach of newer employees. Newer employees are the ones having families. So at some point, we have to get them out of apartment rental units and into something that has room outside for kids to play, right? We've got to have the community. My concern is that over time, and we haven't seen a lot yet, but we're going to start seeing it as we have to hire more people out of the valley and other areas. We're going to get what we call what I term commuter firefighters. They're going to come up here, work their shift, and they're going to go back down to the valley, which is completely different than what we're used to today, where a majority of our employees grew up and have served in this community. They're the people that you see as baseball coaches on the baseball field, serving at the high school, doing the extra things. Our assistant chief of planning logistics, Cody Rose, to help the football team out at I know I'm in the wrong city, but to help the football team out at Bradshaw Mountain, went and got his CDL so he could volunteer to drive the bus for the football team and save them money. These are people that are committed to the community, and these are people that we need to keep here in some way. The other part of this study, and something that we talked about, is a cadet program for the fire department, not just your regular fire EMS cadet program, but a cadet program that is really about life, right? We're not just developing the next fire and EMS person. Maybe it's the next entrepreneur, right? Business owner. So we want to expose them to fire and EMS throughout their early high school and into high school and some early college. But we also want to expose them to, this is a checkbook. Partner with Yavapai College. How do you handle your personal finances? This is a lug nut for a tire. This is how you do this. Invite folks like Mr. Fan, Brad and Ron Fain, and Jason Giese to talk to them about leadership development and entrepreneurship. Introduce them to these things. Now, the hope is that by doing this, we're going to build a pipeline of candidates for jobs in this area so that the kids have something to do and don't have to leave. The upside is, for the parents, they're not leaving the area. The downside for the parents is they probably can't move out either. But they're gainfully employed and can pay rent, right? So just some things that we're looking at. You wouldn't necessarily think a cadet program for attainable housing, but when I talked to NAU, she said, that's the best jobs program I've heard. That's the best opportunity and maybe one of the key tools you need to help with the recruitment and retention as it relates to attainable housing. So it's a combination of things. Is it finance and mortgage assistant? Is it development? Is it developing our kids today and giving them access to jobs to keep them here? It's a multi-pronged approach. I don't know the best I don't know the best road forward, but I think NAU is going to help us, because as much as we try, at least with NAU, we have a team of researchers dedicated to this at least 8 hours a day. And that's something that I know that you can't do and I can't do. So with that, I hope that will help our entire area, and that's the focus of this. So in the end, I want to bring a study forward, show you what NAU has that's applicable to our entire Quad City area and all of those entry-level service positions that we have here. So with that, be happy to answer any other questions. I hope this gives you some insight as to what they're trying to do.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Questions?
How big is your line personnel? How many do you have?
Right now, we have 132 positions. We don't have them all filled. We have a 3-year staffing plan because we need to add another engine company. But in our 3-year staffing plan, based on our numbers, we likely won't be able to fill the positions we have available for 4 to 5 years because we can't get the numbers we need.
How do your salaries compare to the Valley, to Phoenix and all that?
We try to maintain around the 75th percentile. I think we're really close to starting salaries in the city of Prescott. But when I look just at priority ambulance, for example, we just increased our paramedic pay. So a firefighter paramedic would start at $64,000 a year. Priority ambulance is paying $68,000 to start. And AMR is paying $72,000 to start. So we're somewhat competitive with the market, but as a fire district, I don't have access to anything other than property tax. When you look at municipal agencies in the Valley, they have multiple sources of income, so they have the ability to pay a little more than we do. And they don't have to drive an hour and a half one way to get here, which is a challenge. Yes, sir.
Chief, in connection with the Regents grant and the research that they're going to be doing, how much customization or involvement will you have in the research? And specifically, some thoughts that come to mind is I'm a big advocate of not only identifying areas that are within a reasonable commute, but the key word here is reasonable because of what you said. As a rookie firefighter, EMT, the culture and the dynamics of invested into the community as a mentor and as a coach, showing up an hour early for work to give that good pass down. All of those cultural values are really embedded in the resources that we have available to support that firefighter EMT. So if they are having to go to the length of an unreasonable commute, it's going to compromise that. And so the essence of my question is, I've always been a big advocate of revitalization campaigns. So there's two members of the community, if we were to segregate it, those that tax the community and those that are first responders that are here to help the community. And what would the unintended consequence look like if we revitalized the community so much that we reduced our call volume in some of these areas where maybe we're giving the first responder a healthy incentive to move in, remodel the home, and then we see a reduction in either crime response for law enforcement or EMS response for fire and EMS. Can you customize that research to that level?
I don't know that they can customize the research to that level because their expertise is not in emergency response as far as, hey, if we revitalize this neighborhood, will it reduce the call volume? Because the question is, if it's revitalized, who's moving in? So if you take a neighborhood that's underprivileged, underserved, where maybe there's some drug problems that exist, so now you're running more overdose calls, and then you bulldoze it and you create a gated retirement community, well, now we still have the call volume because now we have emergency response for emergency medical calls. So I don't know that there's a good way to say, if this, then this will happen. And one of the model cities that I could point to look at something like that in blighted areas is Westminster, Colorado. That city does a fantastic job of envisioning what an area can be. The city will invest in the area, begin the project, and then sell the project to a developer who shares their vision. They have never once lost money as a community, and they've revitalized some blighted areas into some amazing commercial developments and master plan communities. Now, what has that done for Westminster's call volume? It shifts, right? You take care of this area, people move over here, and you're just shifting things around.
And forgive me for not clarifying, but my intent or my vision with the revitalization campaign is to have that as one of the solutions for housing for first responders.
Okay.
The incentive would be specific towards our workforce housing campaign.
Right. And again, I think it really depends, because when we look at some of the areas, say in Prescott Valley, some of those older areas that are in need of revitalization, a lot of them are manufactured homes. And so it's very difficult to move in and completely gut and revamp a manufactured home and have any real value out of that because of the age of it.
Sure. So
if you look at some place like Castle Canyon Mesa, where you do have single family homes that are just older, you could try something in that area, but someone would have to own the properties to be able to get folks in there. The ones we're seeing coming up for sale right now that need revitalized are $350,000 to $400,000, and they need to be gutted.
Anything else?
I got a couple, Mike. You don't mind? Oh, Connie, go ahead.
Go
sorry. Chief, I was just going to ask, and I missed it probably here, but you said time frame for this research to come out. It was 10 months, but maybe a couple months already used up?
It was 12 months. I think a couple months already used up from when I went up and we received the Regions grant.
Okay. So we're looking at about a 10-month until we see it come out, essentially?
Correct.
Okay. Grant availability for fire service or EMS at the state level, has there been any? Now, granted, I know you don't have like an in-house
Right.
grant writer or whatever.
Right.
But has there been any low-hanging fruit from that sense for fire districts and folks like yourselves around the state for that?
Not a lot in the way of grants. I know there's a program, the state set $5 million aside through the Department of Forestry and Fire Management to use as a grant program for some agencies. Those monies were allocated when the budget came out in July. We still have no idea what the state's doing with those funds, but there'll be one-time smaller expenditures, for example, by a alternative response unit pickup, something along those lines, as opposed to any major, anything making a significant difference for the agencies. And none of it would go to any type of housing or ability to assist firefighters with, or law enforcement or nurses, because I don't want to cut anybody out, teachers, with purchasing or getting into properties.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's all I have. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chief.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, very good. I liked what you said in your speaking with maybe subsidizing, and I'm assuming that's what you were talking about, subsidizing some of the income for like fire, for
Right.
example. They've got a few days off. I know a lot of them, my son did it. They start little businesses on the side
Sure.
that they can do a few days a week. Have you ever considered partnering with some of the general contractors in the area as an intern program where they can actually learn a trade? Because I know a lot of these guys are short a lot of times. They may not be able to work 5 days a week, but they can find some kind of a trade that they might be able to go on and supplement their income as a firefighter.
So what's interesting is a lot of the folks that we do hire, especially from this area, we're actually taking from the trades.
Oh, okay.
And then what we're seeing now, which is something we've never seen before, is they're with us a year, year and a half, 2 years, and then they're leaving to go back to the trades because the building trades are paying more today
Yeah.
because the development is good. So most of our folks have some sort of trade background. It's a matter now for us keeping them
right.
keeping them employed. So if we took someone who didn't have a trade background and then we provided them the training through an intern program, and then I lose them. So
Yeah.
it's not that we don't. Our folks do have access to overtime. They have access to doing things like becoming a hazardous materials technician, technical rescue, all of which pay a stipend, peer fitness. So there's other ways that they can generate additional income for the firefighters. But just as the Yavapai college study showed, you need, I think it was either $156,000 or $165,000 a year to get into the housing market in this area. We're paying a firefighter EMT around $55,000 a year, $53,000 a year to start. The only way they make 64 is if they're a paramedic. And even those, in the last 2 hirings we've done, and we've been hiring we need anywhere from 10 to 15 people every time we're going out and hiring. We're getting 9 to 10, and none of them are paramedics.
Would any of that money be available to use to do a buy down on the interest rate? Years and years ago, I don't know if anybody remembers, you're old enough, when the interest rate was at 17%, and some of the mortgage, actually this is your area, the mortgage companies were paying for points, buying down interest rate, or extending the time of the loan. Has anybody talked about any of that in terms of just maybe using some of that money to buy down the interest rate so that the payment for whatever the home that they're getting into is a little more affordable?
Right. So that's something that the region or the NAU research group will look at. The grant monies the Board of Regents gave were simply to fund the research, so there's no additional grant monies for that. And then on the monies the state put aside, those are really only for one-time smaller projects for agencies to submit for, but there's no grants at this time in the state of Arizona that I am aware of, unless someone from the mortgage industry knows different, that would help anyone buy down points or buy down percentage points or even help with a down payment.
Yeah, that's a shame, because I think that might be one avenue.
And that may be something that the researchers recommend.
Yeah.
Is that we look for some sort of grant. And listen, I understand we're in Prescott, so I'm going to say this, but this isn't me because I didn't create earmarks again. However, There are some congressionally controlled or directed spending earmarks. And so is it possible with this research to go to our senators and Congress representatives and say, hey, can you take some of that money and help us with a grant program over the next year or 2 years to help buy down payments or points on loans for first responders, nurses, teachers in the state of Arizona? I don't know if that's possible, but as far as I'm concerned, you don't know unless you ask.
I agree with you. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, sorry, Chief, but just one thing I forgot
Sure.
to ask. So you mentioned out of 132 positions that that currently CAFMA has right now, they're not all filled.
Correct.
Out of the ones that are not filled, can you give us a percentage of the ones that aren't filled that are having issues with housing? Essentially, has housing played a part in the ones that haven't been filled, and can you give us an idea of percentage of what that is?
So conjecture would be that one of the reasons we're not getting enough recruits to our area is that housing is a problem.
Okay.
And folks don't want to make the commute, especially when every other fire department in the valley is hiring. Scottsdale, Phoenix, you name it, they're all hiring right now. So I don't have a number for that. I can say that during our last recruit academy, we lost one recruit after 9 weeks to the city of Scottsdale, down where he lives. And then we lost an 18-month employee to the city of Phoenix because it's down where he lives. And I would say out of our most recent hiring, about 50% or 5 out of 10 live down in the valley, where we have significant concerns that if they are offered a position with any of the area valley departments, that we're going to lose them. Unfortunately, I can't make a hiring decision based on that because I've also lost people up here who went back into the trades or went back into ranching and left the fire service.
So do you think in that scenario, is it mainly, so this gentleman stays in Scottsdale, is it pay, benefits, no commute? Or is it, gosh, we would love to be up there, weather's great, we love it, small town feel, but can't make it because of housing?
It's pay, benefits, commute.
Okay, so
Right.
that's what it seems to be true right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of it is that. And then in the one case, the gentleman who went to Phoenix, his wife's a CPA and couldn't replicate her professional position in the Quad City area. And so they were never going to be able to move up here, even though she had a good job, because she can't commute Monday through Friday. So the hopefully, if we can create the cadet program, we have fewer of those folks that are coming up from the valley, that we can hire our homegrown folks, and that they're going to want to stay because of commitment to the community. Now, for our agency, and I know the city of Prescott, Chief Dura has talked about it, he hasn't made the move yet, we've gone all the way back to what we call a green academy. So previously, you had to be in, when you were hired, you had to be a reserve, you had to be an EMT, you had to have firefighter 1 and 2, you had to have your hazmat, and you had to have all of those wildland, you had to have it all. Today, we require you to have a valid driver's license, not to be convicted of a felony or any other significant crimes, and you have to be an EMT. And that's it.
Wow.
And so our academies now are 14 weeks long. The other challenge with that is we're hiring people who this is their first experience with the fire service as opposed to reserves who were with us for a year, 2 years, 3 years in advance of being hiring. So those folks knew this is the career that I want. This is where I want to be, right? Now we're bringing people in who are switching careers or are new and they're just looking for something exciting, and then they get in and they're like, yeah, not for me. So that's the other side of the cadet program is if you get them in there and you get them introduced for 3, 4, 5, 6 years, now you've got somebody that you're fairly certain is committed to this profession and staying with it. And probably over that time developed something on their days off, whether it's real estate, construction, whatever it is, where they can sustain. So there's a lot of things that need to be done with attainable housing. But I also think a significant piece of this, as I mentioned earlier, is let's get into the schools. Let's provide access to our kids. Let's give them an outlet and let's help guide them. And even if they don't get into the fire service, they go law enforcement, teacher, or they're the next developer in the area. Let's help give them a pathway to stay here.
I got kind of a long-winded one, I'm not sure. I don't mean to make you stand there, Chief.
you're
but
fine.
I entered the fire service in '74, made $938 a month, and housing was a problem then. And the way we cured it on my department is, like you said, all the guys came from the trades. So we had sign-up lists, and you had to do 2 times. So I go help you build your house, and I went and helped you build this house, and then you came and built my house. And we cut 50% of the construction cost out of building that home. Because everybody knew what they were doing. They'd done it before, and they were still doing it on the side, C-shifting, you know what that means. And we were able to, we created workforce housing. We didn't even know what it's called. And we did that in the 70s.
Sure.
And I think they're still doing it.
They are. As a matter of fact, there's a couple of members of my agency who had property already. One of them built a house right behind me, but his wife had bought the property when she was 16 years old. Her parents had helped her. So they owned the acreage, and then he had never built a house before, so I just watched him back there staring at the ground. But he built a beautiful home with the help of the trades folks within the agency. There's several other folks doing that as well. But one of the challenges today is when you look at just bare property now, even that price has gone up significantly, and then you still have to have a place to live in the interim. So we have folks that sold their home thinking this was a good idea. I'm going to sell. I'm going to go to a piece of property, I'm going to build, and I'll live in a camper for a short time. And then because of supply chain issues, interest rates, it just costs in general, trying to find subcontractors for those we don't have in the fire department. Now they're stuck living in their fifth wheel because they can't afford to build the house, even doing it themselves. So, but part of that is the supply chain issues today, trying to get a hold of those things. Just as an example, the engines that we just ordered for $1.1 million a piece, we won't see them for 3 years. So, and I know I've seen houses sit waiting for garage doors, toilets, bathtubs. So there is some of that happening out there. Some of them are doing it. Some of our folks are in rental properties. I don't think you would want them even cutting a 2x4, but so there's still a balance there. And in my opinion, as with anything, there's personal choice, right? I mean, when I first started in the fire service in '95, it was everything we could do to stretch our dollar with high interest rates to get into a home. And now today, you could take what I paid for that home and almost buy a truck. New. Almost.
I know.
As long as it wasn't a high-end one.
My point was, though, is that you have a tremendous workforce
We do.
that works for you. And our department helped organize that. It wasn't just a loose deal.
Sure.
Association got involved. It's very organized, and records were kept, and how much time did you put in, and how much time did you put in, and the guys that really wanted to build a home put in the time, and then we went and built his house, and he didn't spend any money on labor. I mean, it's right. I mean, I develop, you do. It's 50% of our cost, right? Labor. So I mean, it's just something to
Sure.
consider,
No, and like I said, I think there is some of that. I know I served as the general contractor on my house. It wasn't a good idea, but I did it and saved, about $40,000 off the bill. So that type of thing is happening, but coordinating it within the agency today versus back then it's just different than it used to be. And we're hiring a different group of people who don't know which end of a hammer to use. We're teaching them, and they're showing us how to use our phones. So it's a give and take.
I remember.
They're good people. They really are.
Okay, anything else? Thank you so very
Thank you,
much.
Cal. Thank you,
Look
folks.
forward to hearing from you in several months.
We will definitely keep you up to date on where that is. As soon as we get a copy of the report, we'll get it to Amber so she can get it to you.
Perfect.
Anything we can do to help. So I think it's better for working together.
Would it be okay for Chief to take his picture with the committee and just as public outreach, this is something that we want to share and
Sure.
just,
Yeah, that's fine.
I think that'd
If
be great.
everybody's okay with it, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
America's Most Wanted, or
You've
what?
got- Perfect.
But yeah, if everybody wants to stand up and gather by the dais, then
All right.
we'll make sure to post it when the Badgers beat Bradshaw at the football game.
Yeah.
All guys in front, or what?
Yeah, go for it.
It's like a buckshot line.
Get in the middle? All right.
Let's get this way.
Go.
We probably should turn it like this.
Perfect.
We'll send that out.
Where were you at?
With
that picture, Chief?
Oh, okay. Nice. Sorry to put you on
My
the
son's
spot.
married for
Oh, no
right
problem.
Actually, that was almost a perfect segue to the next section. I did want to just kind of bring up that two other projects are kind of happening in the area. So Chino Valley School District in the paper, they just did their 10 studio teacher housing complex last week, which are really cute little studios. And then Prescott Valley, as Chief had mentioned, they are working on the Baja Apartments being built, which is a 139 unit complex with rent expected to be between $900 and $1,100. And that's focused towards first responders and workforce as well. So those are a couple different projects happening in the area just to keep ideas flowing. But yeah. All right. And then we will move on to public education and outreach. So we've had discussion over the past couple of months about possible community responses to workforce housing, how to combat NIMBYism, so not in my backyard-ism. Part of the reason that this committee is focused on the workforce and police, fire, teachers, nurses, is because the council felt that those were groups that the community could get behind to start with and do good pilot programs. And so this discussion is just really to talk about ideas you guys have to kind of start working to create positive community outreach efforts for that when projects or ideas come up that we are likely to have more community support.
And I think this item was brought up with Commissioner Kennedy, who has expressed some concern on what she's heard. We met with another individual in the town that had started a program for workforce housing and immediately got they received lots of pushback. So I think getting ahead of, and I've seen a couple of little snippets in the paper on concern of impacting home values. I think it's important that we, and maybe this is the first effort at that, of getting out to the public and making sure there's an understanding that we're not talking about Section 8 housing. We're not talking about homeless housing for the homeless. We're specifically talking about workforce housing and concentrating on housing for police, fire, nursing, teachers, professions in the community that serve our community, but they also need help. So I think the discussion, unfortunately Nicole is not here, but the discussion needs to be what should we be doing to stay ahead of the curve and make sure that we educate the community on what we're really doing here. Any thoughts?
Well, yeah, I sent you an email about that in response to Nicole's email, and I think it starts, Mike, here at the top, and I think you just said it. We have to be careful with our words when we use the word affordable housing. That's not what this is. And if you look at the definition of affordable housing versus workforce, it's two different meanings.
Right.
And low income, we can't use those words. We need to stick with workforce. And then I've like I've said before, if they own the home at some point, they have pride of ownership, no matter what level it is. And I don't think the community needs to worry about that. So I think as a committee, when we put out information and we talk about it in a public forum like this, we have to be careful with our words. Workforce, not anything but that. And so I agree with what you just said.
Mr. Goodman's on point. I agree 100%. The defining factor of workforce versus affordable is paramount, but only as good as our capacity to convey that to the community. So I think that one of the ideas that I had as I read the email that was put together was, what about subcommittees? We have people on this committee that have diverse talents, diverse experience. Some are, for example, Mr. Goodman with his construction background, and then, myself with mortgage banking background. If you were to have the subcommittees that would specialize in specific tasks, and some examples of this is last night, I was at a community meeting in Wilhoit. The community was up in arms about a developer coming in who wants to donate a portion of the development to YCSO, to fire, so that we have EMS and law enforcement in an underserved area, and talk about a reasonable commute to Prescott. Just right there in the Kirkland Junction. You're looking at a 30-minute commute, which is a peaceful drive, and they're looking at putting in 2.5 to 10 acre parcels. And I personally spoke to the developer about, and the developer is actively considering a segment of those parcels being tremendously discounted for the workforce of the city of Prescott or surrounding communities that would benefit from it. But that wasn't mentioned in the meeting, and it was just the citizens of Wilhoit saying, if you put in additional housing, you're going to deplete our wells, you're going to congest our highways. And I'm listening to this opposition thinking to myself, wow, if we had representation at some of these builder presentation or developer presentations, and we as part of the committee members show up as a subject matter expert saying this is how the community will benefit. Dignity Health needs nurses, needs specialists, and with the cost of housing, this is a tremendous struggle. So you only are in the position to benefit from welcoming, the change and contributing to the change that you see fit according to the Yavapai County mission statement and growth mission statement. So with that said, I personally, I would volunteer to be part of a task force that would go out and speak on behalf of this committee towards the benefits of having a developer develop in that responsible manner.
I mean, I think most people would agree having a fireman in your neighborhood or a policeman in your neighborhood is a very positive asset. So, agreed. So we have a study session coming up. Can we add a discussion and get some input from our city attorney to make sure we're not breaking any of the precious rules
Subcommittees.
about subcommittees? Because I think the study session may end up, number one, focusing on specific items, but also focusing on items that are some of us have expertise in and some of us don't.
Yeah.
So great, thank you. So how do we get that? How do we get the word out? I mean, going to meetings and advocating for workforce housing is a good thing. How do we get it out to the general public so we don't have I hesitate to say ignorant, but for lack of a better word,
Uninformed.
some uninformed, thank you, better word, uninformed responses before they understand what we're really doing.
So on that end, I can let you guys know that our communications department, our tourism, economic development, and communications, they do have certain radio spots and ad spots, things like that. So if the radio was something you guys were interested in doing, we could probably coordinate something like that too.
And who is that?
So that'll be through John Heine that we could set
Okay.
that up. So.
All right.
Also, I was just talking to Arnold, and people like Kiwanis, Lions, all these civic people that are out there, in years past, you would go in, you'd do a presentation, you'd ask if you could go in. Because I think to get this thing to work, you need the people that know what's going on in the community and have power in the community. And that's going to be all your volunteer, your Lions, your Kiwanis. They control a lot of what goes on politically. And if we could do presentations to them, not as a group, but one or two of us, then at least they're informed and they can correct people saying, well, I don't want affordable housing. And then they can say, no, they talked to us and they said that this is workforce housing and this is how it helps you. You know, I'm one voice, but if I can talk to 10 voices and they can talk to 10 voices, then pretty soon it gets in the community and it's pretty well understood what we're trying to do here.
Okay.
And I have no problems. I'll go anywhere you want and talk to anybody you want,
All right.
except for the president.
Yep, absolutely.
So one of the other things I think is really important too, I know when I was building in more high-end areas, the first pushback I got when people would understand that I was coming in to develop property was the fear of the unknown. So the very first thing I did, I paid an artist to do an artist rendering, and I posted what was going to be there. And I think it's going to be very important for us to have a prototype. I think the fear of the unknown is exactly what motivates and drives the NIMBYs, if you will. And if we can do, have an actual prototype, have some good photography taken of an area that's been done and done well, I think it's very important in this case to provide for buffering in the neighborhoods that would be adjoining these projects. And then what we do is you follow up with the numbers. I think after their fears are, been taken care of what this property is going to look like, how's it going to affect their properties, what can we do to buffer the area, then you come in and say just exactly what Arnold was saying. This is what we're going to be saving. We're going to be helping your community to have police, fire, nurses, and teachers. Then the facts come in. But I think the first thing, people are visual. They need to see what we're talking about, because the first thing that comes to mind when you say workforce housing is a bunch of trailers sitting out, in the barren ground. I think if we offer some beautiful landscaping, hardscaping, the chief made a great point. What do we do with families? Maybe the area includes a playground or, a pool area, depending upon whatever it is. But they do need to have an area that accounts for the family. So I think it would be really good for us to come up with a couple of prototypes, some good photography of areas that have done it and done it successfully, so that we can go in and represent to the people that are very worried about their property values going down, that this is what we're talking about. We're not talking about a barren piece of dirt that's going to have trailers on it. So I do think that that's just a psychological thing we need to think about doing. Thanks.
Mike? Kind of a nutty idea, but we have an event down at the square almost every weekend. Why don't we have a booth down there? And instead of you and I being down there trying to explain off-duty fire and police personnel, people tend to listen. When somebody in uniform, they'll come up and talk to them and they'll listen. And if those guys are going to benefit from workforce housing, then they need to be vested and help us out and get the word out, get involved. I mean, it's just like that donate to the boot program. You've seen it, right? Those guys do really well. The money goes to the burn ward or wherever it's going, but people respond to that, especially firefighters, and police a little different, but firefighters are pretty responsive. So that's another idea. Like she said, some pictures. When I went to you were there, that Chino grand opening deal for the workforce, right? You guys had the photos and everything up. That really helped because it gave us a visual,
That's it.
And let those guys explain it. I mean, they're the ones that are going to benefit from it. And I think people would listen to them. And we have a venue every weekend, darn near, during the summer anyway. So just an idea.
So, Randy, great idea. Along those lines, if I may, another idea, and I know we're going to have a study session on this, but as committee members, being more proactive, reaching out to the community, talking to the fire chiefs, talking to the HR resources at YCSO, anybody who were asking for the participation in an outreach event like that. How many of you would think it would be beneficial and also maybe compliant, considering there's a lot of concern about what can and can't be said and how we communicate? Should we have a City of Prescott email address associated to us for this position? Perhaps that would be also a good way to make sure, everything that's being communicated is under a controlled server, number one, but also the recognition when we do reach out to somebody, this is somebody on behalf of the City of Prescott. Perhaps our efforts are going to be more recognized, and that will give us more traction with these efforts.
I would defer to the city on that.
Yeah, that's something we can look into. And when we talk about that at the study session, we'll have legal there and they can hopefully give some guidance on how that would work with the committee processes.
Okay.
By the way, Arnold, I've gotten several emails to my city email address about this subject, people that watched it online. And I'm going to say 95% of the people they're asking for the definition of workforce housing. That's why I think it's very important. I mean, I can have them, I'll get a picture of a trailer park out in the dirt, and then I'll put up there not workforce housing, and then we can get a picture of a workforce housing, and we can label that and have it in a big poster size and post that, because the trailer park is what everybody's thinking. They are reaching out.
Just a couple comments here, or questions. So I guess, Amber, first of all, on the study session, are we going to we have education and outreach as part of something we're hammering out at that meeting, correct?
So not technically at that one. And we do have a section in this meeting to talk about what's going to be on the study session. But the study session is going to be focused on mission and vision, which I think actually could entail a lot of this.
Okay.
And then the general plans housing element. So those are the top two that everybody
Okay.
kind of wanted to hear. But mission and vision can really involve what is your mission, what is your vision, and what are our definitions that fit into those too.
Okay.
Can you mission, vision, and public outreach, just so we're
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
violating any notice?
Yep.
Thank you.
So with that said, is there anybody, and maybe you can speak into this a little bit, Amber, or someone else, maybe George, I don't know. But so the resources that are available right now, say for a social media campaign or posting, right? So the city has the economic development, you mentioned it. How available is that resource to us now, like today? Like,
So
can we utilize it? What would it take to utilize it? Like, how can we get kind of some clarity around that?
yeah, so I can reach out to them and see exactly what the openings are, and I can send that out to the group of whether it's interviews on the radio or a radio ad if you guys wanted to put it together, and then we could possibly have them come talk to build that
Okay.
outreach.
Okay, because I don't know how it works internally, but I guess my point is for this committee is there's a lot. It's a power tool to use social media to engage people. It's the lowest hanging fruit. It's the ones that are. Yes, you get very honest feedback there. You get pummeled by other things that are not true, all that stuff. But I think as of right now, I would like to see maybe even compiling. I think you start the narrative by saying, look, you're not here. Obviously, there's very good, loyal people that we see here often at these meetings, but the grand majority are not here. And so we have to engage them in some space. So I feel like at the very least, we can gather what we've learned here so far, maybe get the highlights of every presentation. You got the fire, City of Prescott, you got CAFMA, you got hospitals, you got nurses, you got all these, and compile some sort of social media engagement campaign that we can shoot out and say, this is what your Workforce Housing Committee is doing right now. This is all the same data that we're understanding and hearing. And then that'll also help us gather what is the pushback. So back to Connie's point, the fear of the unknown is huge. For us, we can't combat that without knowing what the actual fears are specifically. So if we start gathering some information from that engagement on social media and say, hey, this is kind of what people are saying, well, let's address those things as a workforce housing committee with truth
Yeah.
and good information, and start building that kind of hand-in-hand relationship with the community so that we also hear from them as we're moving along and understanding the problem or the severity of the problem. Really, we have a huge problem, but maybe engaging that through social media. I would say right now, and these are just quick ideas, neighborhood meeting alerts, right? So most applicants, developers, I've done them several times, neighborhood meetings. If we would even have the opportunity to know when those are, which I think as the city should know when those are, that would be just a low-hanging fruit for us to know, hey, here's a neighborhood meeting that so-and-so developer builder is going to do. And that gives us the opportunity as committee members to be present, to hear feedback, to hear the public, to hear the builders, and then start putting some things together from that end, I would think. Now, granted, there's rules, who can be there, does it need to be public notice, all that stuff, but that's not what I do. That's up to you guys. And then pre-application meetings. Can there be a way now? I'm just thinking of can we do now, checking internally with attorneys and all this stuff and saying, okay, pre-application meetings, George, everyone's in the room. This person wants to do a project. Can we have a very brief discussion about what they're willing to do to alleviate some workforce housing issues in the city? Not saying it's you need to do this, no policy, no nothing, but just saying, hey, we're pretty serious about this problem. You're coming in here to put in 50 lots, 100 lots, whatever, an apartment complex. What are your thoughts as a developer builder to be able to contribute to alleviating this problem?
Absolutely.
Even that information eliminates us trying to do that one-on-one or getting with other, builders, developers one-on-one, and it brings that information as a whole to the committee. Those are just some thoughts. Like radio, I think is a good thing. Let's engage them there also and see what the public has to say. I think we have a good idea of what the pushback will sound like, but I think it's only appropriate to just get into those trenches now because it's going to shape a lot of what we do here. So anyways, those are just my comments. Sorry, it's like a blurb, but I was just writing things down here.
That's
So
okay.
thanks,
Yeah, I
Mike. I
can
appreciate
gather
it.
that information from our communications department, see how they feel would be best to kind of go at that, and we'll see what we can do.
The social media part, I'm sorry, Mike, the social media part I say is huge.
Yeah.
If we can get an answer on that, because I'm almost thinking too, like you take the highlights of all this data we're getting, that's like, wow, this is how big this problem is. And we bring that to fruition. We manifest that in even I'm thinking like if you had a trifold at the city, something, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, hey, are you interested in what we're talking about at workforce housing? Take a brochure and listen to all these folks that have taken time to present to this committee with the issues we face. Start informing people, giving them what we have. With the coupling of the social media, I think would do a lot of good work for us right now early on. Thank you. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. So lots of great ideas. Anthony, I'm a Kiwanis member, so it's easy for me to go before the club and talk about this issue. One thing I think we need to be a little cautious of, and maybe we should start with John Heine and talk about public outreach and ensure that we have a consistent message. What I wouldn't want happen is John goes and talks to the Rotary and I go and talk to Kiwanis, and and they don't match. And it needs to be consistent with our mission.
For that, it has syllabus that says, here's what we talk about, and here's how you respond or how you present it.
Right.
I mean, that's fairly simple. All of us get a copy of that. You just don't deviate from
Yeah,
it.
right. It needs to be accurate,
Yep.
needs to be honest,
Yep.
and needs to be consistent. So if the committee agrees, I'll set up a meeting with John Heine and start there, and then probably come back to this commission again and say, okay, here's the points that we've talked about and what needs to be addressed and how to do it, and then put an action plan into place.
Yeah, agreed.
And I'll be
Sound
willing
good?
to do a podcast if you all want to show up.
Oh, perfect.
Want to
Okay.
do that?
Yeah. that'd
We'll
be
have a
great.
roundtable, but what we need to do, I think, is exactly what you said, is Why don't you all start by picking up 3 points that you think are pertinent? And we'll compare them all, and then we'll pick out the highest, like the need, I'm thinking, we talked about that, what workforce housing looks like. So we'll compile a script, if you will. And then
Definition.
we'll do a podcast, and you can share it on your sites, whatever you have.
So just to mention podcast, we'll have to check with legal because that would still probably count as a meeting though.
Okay, check with them.
So just because there'd be a quorum, so
Sure.
it'd have to have minutes and all that, but we can definitely work on doing that.
Yeah, and I'll be happy to do a few shows too on it.
That'd be great.
Coming up.
That'd be awesome.
Okay, anything else on that issue at this time?
All right.
All right.
So now we're on to the workforce housing project manager position. So this was a topic at a previous meeting. Chair Fanton wasn't able to be at that one, so we have it back on the agenda for discussion. Looking for my email. Chelsea did reach out to our HR, and the position that would entail looking at all of these things would be between $104,000 and $143,000, including benefits. So just some information. I'll let Chair Fan take it from there.
Yeah. So blame me for this one. So it was a previous item. I was absent at that meeting. And so I asked Chelsea to put it back as an item to discuss. So I'll just jump out there and say I feel strongly, and I believe this commission does not share my beliefs, or at least some don't, or didn't. Maybe things have changed. So I don't want to go off on my own without a consensus from this group. But I feel that we need a full-time person, staff person. Amber's got lots of other duties at the city. Chelsea has lots of other duties. And between investigating what grants are available, pursuing grants, working with developers, working with the Flagstaff group.
Northern Arizona Housing Solutions.
Thank you so much. Working with the hospital, working with CAFMA, being a liaison. If we're serious about really addressing the issue, and I'll admit I'll be the first one that I have myself to blame for not being at every meeting, but I'm already getting frustrated because we're not getting anything done. If we're going to get something done, we've all got other issues going on. It's not our job to actually do the work. We need someone that's going to do the work. So I would like to go, I think the proper thing to do is go to the city manager. Council sets policy, but the city manager is the one that we would want her endorsement before we brought anything to council to fund a position. But I would like to go to the city and ask them to fund a full-time position, or if not, is there a public-private partnership to put into play that would fund a position? And I think it needs to be a minimum of 3 years, a 3-year commitment, and see if we can get someone that can really help us effectuate change. Thoughts?
Do you think there's enough work for a full-time position?
I do.
think
I really
if it's
do.
done right. If it's done right, it's going to be a full-time position.
Yeah.
Because there's a multitude of topics that we can't, I don't have the time to go out and spend 40 hours a week doing this. But if somebody's paid to do it, that's their job, and they're given a task, and every day they're working on it. I can't work on it every day,
No.
you know?
And obviously this is, what we're doing here is not going to be free. It is going to take commitment from landowners, from developers, from the community. We've already heard, or at least I read in the minutes, what the city can and cannot do. So they're limited, and I think if we start asking to heavily tax the city, if you will, with involvement, it's just going to add to pushback. So if we're going to pursue funding sources, it's going to take somebody, that alone is going to take many hours. So that's my thoughts.
And somebody that's familiar with it and knows how to get by all the roadblocks.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I don't,
Correct.
It's definitely going to require somebody that has a track record of performance if we're going to be successful. We have, so for example, the city of Cottonwood in the Verde Valley, they've partnered up with Northern Arizona Housing. There's down payment assistance programs. So here in Prescott, I don't see that we have the funds for these down payment assistance programs and the tools that will enable the change that we seek. So in order to get the change, as you said, who's going to do the work? And in order to get the work done, whoever's going to be doing that work, let's admit that they're going to face significant headwinds with all of these changes. As Chief Freitag said, that there's challenges in distribution chains and materials and labor. So, I really think that this is worthy of our attention because it's a topic that you need somebody that has done it successfully in the past in order to overcome the hurdles in the current environment. For example, Connie had mentioned some specific challenges about mortgages. And back in the old days, we used to be able to do qualify with ARMs, qualify with temporary buy downs. All of those tricks are out the window with the regulation that has changed the mortgage lending environment. Yeah, you can do a temporary buy down and improve somebody's cash flow, but it doesn't enhance their qualifications. And so when we get down to it, what's really going to make the change is going to communities that have successfully created the change that we seek in our community and finding out, hey, what did they do that worked well in their community that we can implement into our community, and finding the individuals, perhaps recruiting those individuals that have already done it well there, and now they can re-implement that here, as compared to promoting within somebody that is already employed with the city, somebody that has a genuine passion for it but hasn't done it before. That's just my opinion about the characteristics that we're going to seek for somebody if that position becomes available.
I was just going to ask for some comment from as a council person.
Well, one of the things I'd mentioned in a previous meeting is, and we haven't had that here yet, and I'm not sure if it's still on Chelsea's docket or not, but we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are companies in this country that specialize in workforce housing. Part of the specialization is knowing how to navigate through those government rules and what monies are available to them. But the other part of this is, and you can look this up, there's a formula to this. So let's say you're an entity that needs workforce up here. And I'm going to pick on the hospital again because they really do need help. What they have found that works is, and this is just one example of how they can be invested in this. And we've talked about some ways to earn some money for this. Is they are the ones that can control what they charge for the workforce housing that they would contract with a workforce housing builder to build. But the other incentive is. They can buy that percentage down for their employee with strings attached because it has to be repaid in an eventual manner or it can be forgiven. Because again, as a large entity, they have avenues through their accountants, ways to write certain things off, things that they're allowed to write off. But that's up to the entity that has the need to be able to do that. But the formula of first getting the properties out of the ground is hiring somebody that specializes in those. Doesn't mean that local guys can't do it on their own, but there is a formula already established out there throughout the country, and amounts of money that are available to those organizations, through government and state entities. So I think we still need to have a builder that specializes in workforce housing come up here and, number one, show us the product. Number two, tell us how they're achieving, the affordability of this workforce housing. Because again, there's things that we don't even understand through the government that are, available to us. So I think we should still pursue that and let them come here and show us how they do it. And then if some of the local builders want to get on board to do it, I think that's great, to be able to, to satisfy that need. It's a culmination of a lot of different avenues.
Can't shut up.
Going back to the salary for the position, do we look at federal grant or federal money assistance? I mean, this isn't a Prescott problem. This is a United States problem. So is there any assistance? How do we do that?
That's Randy. Thank you. That's just it. I think there might be grants available. Who's going to write their grant request?
You?
It's not going to be me. There are programs out there. I think meeting with builders, identifying what builders can help out, what programs are out there. All of this takes time. It takes someone assigned to do it, and eventually takes money. So initially funding the position. Now, if we fall flat on our face, then we fall flat on our face. But we need a person that's committed to doing this, that can pursue. There's all kinds of work that needs to be done. And my opinion is Amber and Chelsea, they've got a dozen jobs that they wear a dozen hats. They're not our person, respectfully.
That's
It has to be a dedicated position.
So,
I don't think that people realize what a job we're giving somebody.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of legwork to do to find out what's been done, what can be done, what's available, what's not available.
Yep.
And and that may take a person 40 hours a week. Who knows? I don't know. But I think somebody that's familiar with it will do it a lot quicker than we could.
Right. John?
Yeah, so I just have a couple comments. So I think I wholeheartedly agree that we're going to need a full-time housing project manager. That's for sure. And I only know that to be true because every time I look at my notes or review my notes, there's just an immense amount of work and oversight and implementation. The worst thing we can do here, and I'm sure I can speak for all of us here, is that we have great ideas. We take the time to address an issue in the community and fail miserably on execution. And I think that I think what it comes down to me is it's the question of what is this committee's role? And for me, I'm speaking for myself, I think that it's short-lived for us. For us, we're taking the time, we're putting our minds together to see what the problem is, we're putting in the framework. Maybe very similar, Prescott Valley had something similar. They got a task force together. They laid out these objectives of what they want to see accomplished, and then they're going to find someone to execute those objectives. I think it's similar here. Again, that's just me. I don't see ourselves as a long-standing working body, of a committee body of saying, here's a project, and now it goes to the committee for workforce housing. The committee makes its recommendations. It goes to the planning and zoning. Planning and zoning makes the recommendations to the council. The council. It just doesn't seem like that's the most efficient way. I think right now it's like we put our heads down, we grind on seeing the issues, we come up with great ideas, we put the framework together, and then we hire someone to implement it and execute the plan. So there's still some work from my perspective, there's still some work we need to do for sure to give that person a plan, right? This is what the city put this committee to do. This is what the plans are. It gets recommended. Council adopts what they want from that plan, and then that person has a job description, right? And it's like, here are your goals. This is what you need to go do. As far as funding, maybe, so I'd say yes, I agree with it. Let's earmark it because I think there's still essentially what is the plan, I guess is what we need to get down to. And also help, because I agree 100%. There's so many, nonprofit worlds live off of grants, and they just have the one person's job is to look for them. Where are they? Are they at state level? Are they at federal level? And they're writing grants all day long and funding $250, $500 million in grants coming in, which is, let's face it, the biggest hurdle we have here is funding sources. Most of all our conversations circulate around like, great idea. Who's paying for that? How does that work? You know, so it's huge. Like, and you've always been huge proponent on that, Mike, of like the grant writing. Huge. We need that for sure, right? Because revenue is an issue. We're not Sedona, and we don't have $2 million to play with for workforce housing projects. So I just say yes. I'm in support of it. To me, I relate this position very closely to what a CDBG administrator, Michael I don't know what his like technical job role is. I should know because I'm at CDBG, but it's very similar. He gets paid the admin costs of the program, which is a federal program, pays him to be in that position, and he functions for the city and the liaison between the committee that's making decisions for projects, right? So for me personally, I'm not an HR specialist. 104 to 143,000 seems exorbitant, but I don't know. Maybe it's fair.
Keep in mind, that's 100% of that is all of the burden and everything.
Burden
So-
on benefits,
So
sure.
The salary itself is considerably less than that.
Sure. Yeah. So again, I'm in favor of it. I just think I think as we move on with this committee, we'll find that we'll be writing up the job description of what this person's will be handling. So at least now we're aware of it. I think it seems like we have the consensus that it's needed. And so now it's just going to be, you know, for example, this person will be in contact with CAFMA, City of Prescott Fire, Police Department, hospital, just even making the time to talk to those folks and keep a relationship going of what's happening in your organization. We can't do that. There's no way we're going to ever be able to keep up with that amount of workload. So anyways, those are my comments. I'm in support of it. I just think there's still some work to do to build that job for somebody.
And when we're talking about funding voices in addition to grants, this is probably the most philanthropic community that I'm aware of. And there's a lot of people out there that I think would help. So anyway, so do I have?
Sorry, can I have one last thing? So one last thing is if we have the plan in place, I think for this person.
Sorry,
boy.
I meant to do an announcement about this before we started. It is just a test of the
Emergency
federal
broadcast.
broadcast.
All right, we got it.
There's not an emergency.
Yeah.
It works. That's
Yep.
great.
Hey, Mike,
They agree with us.
Yes, sir.
hire the position, where are they going to live?
Oh,
Good question.
And we're back to square one.
Yeah. Okay.
Let us know how.
Okay. Are we unified that
think so,
to endorse me to go visit with the city manager and talk about this issue and something? Everybody in
Yeah.
agreement?
I'm
Okay.
fine with that.
Good. Thank you.
I'll set up that meeting.
All right. Next up.
So this has been updated now to mission and vision and public outreach. So the committee was sent a list of topics that Chelsea had collected over the past couple of meetings. And the top two that were requested to be discussed at our study session on the 16th from 10 a.m. to noon in this room was mission and vision and then the general plan's housing element. Now, everybody has a bit of an outdated, I've been told, copy of the housing unit element.
Want me to explain what that is?
Yeah, please do.
This is Tammy.
Good morning. I'm Tammy DeWitt. I'm the community planner with the City of Prescott, and I'm also the lead on the general plan update. So what we put together is tidbits that what housing was already in the general plan, in the last general plan, because this has been an issue forever. I was part of a housing task force in the Verde Valley in 2006 until it dismantled because of the downturn of the economy and they had no staff. So this has been an issue forever in this region. So what we're hoping to do is that have you guys help us write a new element, a housing element for the general plan. This is where you're going to write up the goals and strategies of what things need to be done. If you need a separate position, what are some strategies to possibly get that position? And any other goals, short-term and long-term goals. What are those low-hanging fruit that we can put in the plan? Because we're going to have an implementation section that we're going to hold the city to. So then we're going to have a section, we have a separate website, planprescott.com, Planning the Future, Preserving the Past. this all fits right into that. A great place to put information that has been coming forward. We have room on the website to do that. I'm still learning to edit it. I have a lot of help from IT, and I'm very thankful to them for that. But then we have a separate email address too. And we can create another email address. Right now it's hello@planprescott.com where people can send comments, but we can create another one, housing@planprescott.com or something like that, to have a separate email that you've been talking about. So we have some of these things in place, but what we're hoping to get out of you is to help us update this information, write a really good housing element, which we see a lot of communities doing now, and then create the short-term and long-term goals and how to implement those. And then we'll put that in our implementation section, and then we'll be updating every quarterly or whatever to the council and planning and zoning commission how the plan's being implemented. We heard from the police department, that they're short on people because of housing. I mean, this is what we're consistently hearing from presentations to our general plan committee. And on August 30th, we had an open house at the Rowley Adult Center, and we had a workforce housing board. And we had different questions we were asking people just to put comments. So that's information we can share with you as we move forward with with your study session, what we got from that. We're getting comments from the committee members right now to clarify some comments, but we have all that together right now, and we can share that with you of what we got. But that's kind of what this is. This is information that's in the existing general plan that I cut out that mentioned housing, at least it was a start. So we aren't starting from scratch.
Okay.
Thank you. And these are just kind of to get everybody's brain juices flowing, maybe, for that study session. So when we first came to our first meeting, we kind of gave a draft mission statement, which can either be built upon, completely erased, just something to get you guys thinking about where you want that study session to go, what focus points, discussion points you want to have at that. And all of this does, like Tammy said, tie in really nicely together to where we can talk about the committee's vision, their mission, your talking points for public outreach, and then creating and building and hopefully helping the general plan, creating that strong foundation to move forward with. So these are just up here just to kind of give you guys some thinking thoughts. And then the next item is future agenda items after the study session. So we hope in November to start bringing some of the results from the surveys back to you guys. We are starting to we have, last I checked, 77 plus responses just to the employee one. We've got 8 responses to the organization one. So we'll put that on a future agenda to bring updates on that.
Okay.
Can we wait to do future
Yeah, I was
agenda
just thinking
items
the
until we
same
get
thing.
more stuff out of studies?
Yeah, I think that'd be a great idea. Yeah, wait till after the study session to do that. And when I wanted to add to the prior item on mission, I would ask everybody to be thinking about, number one, the mission statement that we previously put together, but we've really had a shotgun blast out there. It's time to start looking at rifle shots and saying, what can we really accomplish as a committee, and what can we do, and where should we focus our efforts? Right now, it's number one, blurry, to me anyway, and there's just so many avenues to address. We need to start narrowing down and say, what can we really do, and where should we be concentrating our efforts? So I'd asked everybody to be thinking about that prior to the study session, so we can have a
Rifle shot approach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A good conversation regarding that.
I agree.
Agreed?
Yep.
And then future agenda items will always kind of be on here, legal said. It's always good to have it on there just in case you want to talk about it.
Right.
So that's on there. And then I think at this point, that's all I have, and we'll get everything going for the study session, and we'll see you all then.
Perfect. Anything else? All right. Thank you, everybody. This meeting's adjourned.
Early.
Thanks, Mike.
Early.
I guess I think.